Hello and good afternoon or evening or morning, wherever you are in the time zones. And for those listening to the recording, welcome and glad to have you here at the United Lodge of Theosophy for our Saturday afternoon Aquarian series. All right, so today we have the honor of hearing from our Canadian esteemed student, Laura, and let me turn it over to you. Laura, thank you. Take it away.
And thank you for joining in today. We're looking forward to everyone's views and understanding in our effort in understanding these two forces of vigilance and sloth. We did have a talk earlier from the point of view of how aware are we, and we found that that article and that talk really blended right in with this understanding of vigilance and sloth. Before we begin, though, there was an article in the Atlantic paper on introspection, which brought to mind some of the dangers of taking vigilance a little too far, or self-examination, that we can easily become hypervigilant or hyper-aware and lose a foothold on our lives. The Voice of the Silence addresses this when it says on page 67 that beware lest in the care of self, thy soul should lose her foothold on the soil of Deva knowledge. Beware lest in forgetting self, the self of all that is, thy soul should lose over its trembling mind control. The study of the Bhagavad Gita shows a feeling of devotion or altruism, of service to all that lives, is essential. So we must be aware of when our vigilance takes a wrong turn, and we become absorbed in our personality. This will lead, as the article indicated, to depression. And we know that the only way out of that state is a feeling of love, a feeling of devotion, or the action of service. The talks that we've had so far this year, and even concerning the zodiac from the year before, have been wonderful and lead up to this topic of vigilance and sloth. The students have been giving helpful hints and insights into what it is to be vigilant, to have a truer understanding of our eternal nature, and that part of ourselves which is undergoing constant transformation. One of the comments made last week in the talk was diamonds form under pressure, and that the Trinity is outside of duality, a very important concept in trying to understand the idea of vigilance and sloth. Then it says, do the actions which might not be what we want to do, but once accomplished will make us feel better. And then the student talked about the knowledge of music, geometry, and mathematics, and we can see that that is really a knowledge of unity in diversity, of harmony, and of law. And my favorite one was, wear the personality lightly. Do not let it become a heavy cloak. I thought that was quite beautiful. And last year we studied the zodiac, which is a record of these transformations that we have gone through as a humanity. And these transformations have been recorded by the great seers who watch over the progress of ourselves and of nature. They acquired this all-seeing view through their own effort. And so, that too in the zodiac brought us to this understanding today of vigilance and sloth. Real change begins on the inner planes of our being and will gradually be reflected in the form. So we are not to look for results, but work with all conditions, as the voice of the silence says, work with these conditions cheerfully. Some of the texts that we're using today, and we given to us by great teachers down through the ages and students who have been studying for many years, and that have walked the very path that we are on. And they leave a light for us so that we can use these lights as we travel on the path. And these books will bring greater depth to, and you might find brighter gems than the ones that we find today in our study. From The Voice of the Silence by HPB, our beloved Dhammapada, the article from the Theosophical Movement magazine in 2012, How Aware Are We? And quite an interesting article, The Devil's Own, from volume 3 of HPB's articles. It was published under Lucifer in the past. Here we have a depiction of vigilance and sloth. These are two very powerful forces in the cosmos and in ourselves. Most often, we're not aware of them. We're living our lives filled with likes and dislikes until some karmic event throws us into a place where we begin to question. This moment is given in the Bhagavad Gita. Here comes another student. Oh, we got him. As Arjuna, the thinker, standing with Krishna, the higher self, between the two armies. And from this bridge, we see the forces of a nobler quality and of a lower quality. Both have equal value. Both are necessary to aid in the ever-expanding field of perception. We begin to realize that we need to take hold of these two forces if we are going to evolve by our own self-effort. The Voice of the Silence states that if a man does not go through his appointed work in life, he has lived in vain. The first step is to discern the real from the false, the ever-fleeting from the everlasting. And in so doing, we must remain vigilant. We are to strive with our thoughts unclean before they overpower us. And we have to take responsibility for the current of our thought. We are to use them, or they will use us, says the Voice of the Silence. For if thou sparest them and they take root and grow, they will destroy all the progress of our highest intentions. In physics, we know that objects move when a force is applied. And once set in motion will continue until another force sets the object on a different course. This same law exists within ourselves. The sloth of our old habits of body, mind, and feeling, our lunar form, when they no longer suit the direction we are now aiming for, must be killed out so that the solar force of the real ego can build forms of mind and feeling that give a wider field of perception. This study of vigilance and sloth leaves out no department of our nature, visible or invisible, cosmically or in our collective and individual humanity. They are present on every plane of or state of consciousness, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. We can feel sloth as apathy, lethargy, indifference, passivity. It is the very matter we must move into action. And we can see that to move this matter into action, we must have discrimination, viveka. Viveka is discrimination between the real and the unreal, between the self and what is not self. In fact, we cannot change the lower with the lower, for there is no steadiness in the nature that is constantly changing. We need to reach a higher plane that holds the qualities that are permanent and immutable. As the voice of the silent states, thou hast to reach that fixity of mind in which no breeze, however strong, can waft an earthly thought within. Our daily examination will reveal to us those moments when we failed to be vigilant, when we became unmindful or slothful of the thoughts that entered our mind and took hold of our feelings. It is said that the masters do not allow one thought to pass through their mind without being examined. Ormans and Ahriman. The struggle between these two forces can be seen in HPB's article, The Devil's Own. And in the glossary, you will find the words Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu. And you'll find the words Vohu Mano and Ako Mano. And that is Vohu Mano is good thought, and Aku Mano is evil thought. From HPB's article, she says, the two powers are inseparable on our present plane, and at this stage of evolution, it would be meaningless one without the other. They are therefore the two opposite poles of the one manifested creative power. For Ormuzd and Ahriman are respective representatives of light and darkness, of the spiritual and material elements in man and the universe, the microcosm and the macrocosm. In Sanskrit, we have the words apramada and pramada. These are words for heedfulness and heedlessness. Vigilance, of course, belongs to the divine individuality of Ormuzd, and sloth is of the quality of the temporary, changeable world of Ahriman. Further, HBB speaks in detail of the work that we have before us in this Kali Yuga age, along with the hope of true progress during this time. Under what we perceive as the greatness of our civilization, she says, sloth and other vices from Pandora's box lie under the surface, and at some point, karma will have it out, and we will have to self-adjust and try again. For the true goal is to unite our principles into one and serve the self of all. And so if we fail in that effort, karma will show us where we need to make the adjustment in these two forces. From the Devil's Own. And as time is twofold, there being a measured, a finite time within the boundless. Angra Mainyu, or better known as Ahriman, is only a periodical and temporary evil. We need not think of evil here as something that is bad, but is a temporary and changeable, so as not to be relied upon as permanent. Ahriman is heterogeneity as developed from homogeneity, descending along the scale of differentiating nature on the cosmic planes. Both Ormuzd and Ahriman become, at the appointed time, the representatives in the dual type of man, the inner or divine individuality and the outer personality. The animal soul, or Kama Manas, has in its turn 7 archdeves in opposition to the 7 Ameshaspens, and I've practiced to say those words, and or qualities of Ahriman. And archdeves, archideves, the 7 most powerful, says HPB, states them as the opposing forces that rise against Ormuzd. In her article, she calls those forces the thinking personality. And Amshaspens, the holy of good value. Theosophically, we might consider them the virtues, or the 6 divine forces. And there's much written about these in the secret doctrine, so that they, with cosmic ideation, with cosmic substance, with the Daihan Shohans, with the Sephiroth, the archangels, there's correlations between all these terms that we can understand, but they might go beyond the realm of our discussion today. Each knower, or silent witness, is what Mr. Judge calls the permanent individuality. And it has already been through every experience, and with a duty to perform of raising up all matter within the states and planes of consciousness to which we belong. Through all ages, civilizations, and races, we have ourselves built up the forms we occupy, forms of thought, feeling, desire, likes and dislikes. If there is no struggle, there is no growth. Our human progress is not inevitable or automatic, but requires vigilance. Whatever state of mind, desire, or feeling we are in, we can now understand its creation, and we can move through and past it to a loftier position. All of which requires qualities of non-separateness, compassion, altruism, non-judgment of others, an undaunting energy, will, charity, patience, indifference to likes and dislikes of the personality, etc. These are all keys that open the doors to the witness or the knower. The battle commences between the sloth or sluggishness of the lunar karmic form with the solar force of the ever-becoming self. The voice of the silence says, to live to benefit mankind is the first step, and to practice the 6 glorious virtues is the second. It is selfishness which is the begetter of the 7 mortal sins. Before we can liberate ourselves through light from the clutches of darkness, of sloth, we have to know ourselves. We must become acquainted with and gain mastery over every nook and corner of our heterogeneous nature before we can learn to discriminate between self and personality. To accomplish this difficult task, 2 conditions are absolutely requisite in the noble Zoroastrian precept: good thoughts, good words, good deeds, and to crush beyond redemption all personal pride. And in regards to pride, how often does one see Strong-hearted men and determined women, said HPB in her article, moved by a strong aspiration towards an ideal they know to be a true one, battling successfully to all appearances with Ahriman and conquering him. Their external selves have been the battleground of a most terrible and deadly strife between the two opposing principles. But they have stood firmly and won. Personal selfishness, that greed for self and self only, has vanished under the radiant ego sun, making room for better and holier aspirations. Yet, there lurks in them, she says, their old but partially destroyed nature, and it can awake, and in 5 hours or 5 minutes destroy years of self-control. And so down the mountain will that rock go, and we will have to begin the struggle again. But the voice of the silence again says, be of good cheer, because our next struggle up the mountain will be a little easier because of the lessons that we've learned and because of the vigilance that we had acquired in rolling that stone up the mountain the first time. So all is not lost, but we must be careful. From the article, How Aware Are We? A true seeker of wisdom may resolve to pursue the higher life of the soul, but the lower personal nature comes to the surface to claim attention and make demands. His safety lies in keeping his consciousness in touch with the reality of the inner life, to remember his resolve. For any slackness in the remembrance of the higher purposes of existence can weaken his will and confuse his judgment during the tests and trials that come to every seeker. Lord Buddha's teaching on vigilance says that wakefulness is not merely being on one's guard against the lower ebullitions, but having resolved to undertake yoga, sadhana, spiritual practice. This discipline demands sincerity and persistence in the same. A constantly vigilant person experiences the inner joy of freedom from the non-essentials and from the attachment to the personal nature. The Buddha says that the one who has recognized the dangers of heedlessness advances like a fire consuming fetters, small or large. And this brings us to karma. The knower, being mindful, aware, and vigilant, finds the form of his karmic past does not reflect all that he knows. It takes lifetimes of effort, but that no effort, not even the smallest, says the voice of the silence, can vanish from the world of causes. A harsh word uttered in past lives is not destroyed, but ever comes again. The pepper plant will not give birth to roses, nor the sweet jessamine's silver star to thorn or thistle turn. Thou canst create this day thy chances for thy morrow, says the voice of the silence. In the great journey, causes sown each hour bear each its harvest of effects, for rigid justice rules the world. With mighty sweep of never-erring action, it brings to mortals lives of weal or woe, the karmic progeny of all our former thoughts and deeds. Take then as much as merit hath in store for thee, O thou of patient heart. Be of good cheer and rest content with fate, Such is thy karma, the karma of the cycles of many births, the destiny of those who in their pain and sorrow are born along with thee. Act thou for them today or in this life, and they will act for thee tomorrow. As Mr. Judge says, kick not at karma. It has become our friend in the cycle of ever becoming. Judge not anyone by their current condition or form, for they, like you and I, are the self, taking up matter within the lunar form and working it out. Judgment is a waste of time, for we as a whole humanity are in a vast process together. Which then brings us to evolution. Ever greater degrees of vigilance of mind and heart. And from a reading by Bhikshu in his Survey of Buddhism, he gives a wonderful passage. The higher evolution of man takes place in and through awareness. It follows, therefore, that the progress or higher evolution is that at the same time a progress of awareness. It also means that there is a development of an awakened consciousness in the depth and also in the all-embracing breadth. If we survey the process of evolution, we find that the present state of self-awareness in man has been graduated from that of the lower forms of life in nature. Just finding the rest of the quote here. Along with physical evolution, there is an evolution of consciousness, and that consciousness in the creatures also progressed from the most rudimentary in the mineral to that of the vegetable, animal, and higher up in the human kingdom. Man alone is endowed with the faculty of apperception, that is, the ability of observing the state and phenomena of our own consciousness. And now man, the self-conscious thinker, is further evolving towards a higher form of awareness in order to reach that which is called perfect awareness, or samyak samriti, the highest goal for the present race. Giovanni Pico della Mirandola, in his oration of the dignity of man, emphasizes the human potential and unique capacity of individuals to shape their own destiny, that unlike other creatures, humans are not assigned a fixed place in the cosmic hierarchy. Instead, they possess the freedom to ascend to divine heights or descend into baseness. It all depends upon their choices. He articulates this idea, stating that upon creation, humans were given the seeds of every kind and every way of life possible, allowing them to cultivate their nature as they see fit. To replace all our personal desires, our likes and dislikes, with devotion to the self of all that lives, is to bring our many desires or thoughts into a single point of force. This takes time and effort, and no branch of our nature, inner or outer, can be missed. When we look at the life of Gandhi or Martin Luther King and many other examples in our human family, we should ask how many lives of practice did they endure to be ready for their work? Did the life's work of Yehudi Menuhin take only a few short years, Or was it the culmination of lifetimes of dedication? His goal in life, his motive in life, through music and the violin, was to make the world a better place. True greatness in our humanity is reflected through the many who truly wanted to be of benefit, and that energy helped them to overcome the sloth of doubt, fear, and ignorance. And now we must not forget our beloved Dhammapada, which, stating the duality of our human existence, aids us in discernment and gives us much food for thought. So we'll ask Ken if you'd like to read the 2 slides. I will advance them for you.
Very good. Let me back to the front here. All right. The Dhammapada, an essay on Buddha's thought. 1. Vigilance is the path to eternal life. Thoughtlessness is the path to death. The reflecting vigilant die not. The heedless are already dead. 2. The wise distinctly understand this. Therefore, they delight in wakeful watching. They graze in the pastures of Aryas, the noble ones. 3. Meditative, preserving, ever strenuous in endeavor, the tranquil ones attain nirvana, the highest freedom and happiness. 4. Continually grows the glory of that man who is wakeful and mindful, whose deeds are pure, whose acts are deliberate, and who is self-controlled, and who lives according to law. And 5, by endeavor, by vigilance, by discipline and self-control, let the wise man make for himself an island which no flood can overwhelm. And number 6, we have fools and witless persons give themselves to sloth. The wise value vigilance as their treasure. 7, be not a sluggard, have no dalliance with lust and sense delights. He who meditates with earnestness attains great joy. 8, when the prudent man overcomes sloth by vigilance, he ascends to the terrace of wisdom. Sorrowless, he surveys the sorrowful crowd. This wise man regards the foolish as the mountaineer from his high peak looks at those who are dwelling on the plains. Number 9, vigilant among the heedless, awake among the sleepy, the wise one forges ahead even as a charger outdistances a weak horse. And number 10, by vigilance did Indra rise to the lordship of the gods. Vigilance is always praised, heedlessness never deprecated. 11, a bhikkhu who delights in vigilance, who sees the danger of heedlessness, advances like a fire, consuming fetters, small or large. And number 12, a bhikkhu who delights in vigilance, who sees the danger of heedlessness, will not fall. He is close upon nirvana.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much as well, Laura. That was a delightful presentation.
Yes. Well, we see here hope at the bottom of Pandora's box. And it brings to mind a quote from Mr. Judge, who says, arouse in yourself the meaning of thou art that. Thou art the self. This is the thing to think of in meditation. And if you believe it, then tell others the same. You have read it before, but now try to realize it more and more each day, and you will have the light you are looking for. And Mr. Crosby says, when our lives are ended, what will count? our defects? Not at all. It will be the efforts we made to destroy the causes of all defects among our fellow men. And he says that doubt and fear belong only to the personal consciousness. The real perceiver, the higher ego, has neither. So cast aside all doubt and fight on. So,
Well, thank you again. Thank you again, Laura. Um, you covered an interesting variety of thoughts and ideas about sloth and vigilance, with, of course, vigilance, the place where we're aiming towards that
yes,
awareness. And I like at the beginning how you began describing consciousness in a sense of perceptiveness and awareness, that sort of thing. And of course, the warning. Nowadays in society we have a lot of anxiety, which could be equated somehow to hypervigilance that you mentioned at the very
yes.
beginning of your talk, and depression. And those two things are like two sides of a same bad coin, a bad penny, you might say, the depression and anxiety. And I like that you mentioned that service to others is one way out of depression.
Yes, and the discernment between the real and the unreal. If we're still on the side of personality and we're trying to be vigilant and we're trying to overcome sloth, we're only going to get into trouble. We're only going to feel worse. We're not going to make it. It's only when we begin to see the real, the light in ourselves, and to be able to discern that we are not the body, we're not the mind, we're not the desires, or anything that we may see within ourselves, but we are that, as Mr. Judge says at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thou art that. That's fascinating.
And a
I,
lot of the failures of meditation that people experience is because of that lack of discernment between the real and the unreal.
and you mentioned the word viveka in your slides, and
Yes.
that is this discernment quality.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. There's so many words. Every great teacher, all down through the ages, have given out the same teachings over and over again. Maybe they use different words, but the concepts are the same. And all these words represent aspects of ourselves. They're not outside of us, they're within us. These forces that we can see, that vigilance and sloth are two cosmic forces that are necessary, as HPP says.
Indeed. One question that comes to mind with that, as we get to some other questions from the audience here in San Diego, is the connection of vigilance and sloth to the gunas that are talked about. We have one which is the tamasic one. The tamas thought to be more sedentary or perhaps slothful in its own way. Sometimes gets a bad rap, but it's not completely bad. It is necessary. And so I'm wondering, is there some necessary part of slothfulness that might be analogous to how, of the three gunas, tamas is also important?
Yes. Well, when we look at the voice of the silence, and it says, if we fear to help another, that sometimes we can be very spiritually slothful. Sometimes we're very monastically slothful. And so that we see that all throughout our sevenfold nature, that both of these forces exist. And as HPB said, we could ask the question, why is it necessary for them both to exist at this stage of our evolution? So, does anyone have any idea of that? Why is this necessary? Maluka?
Yes, hello, Maluka, you're on.
I don't have an answer for that, but I just want to say that it was lovely. And I like how you started and how you went through, the three forms of presentation with the beginning, middle, and end. It's sort of all come together. Well done. And the there is a thought that is being in my mind for the last few days, and maybe you can help me out. Um, HPB talks about that India, as many other countries, were robbed out of their soul by the colonizers. I was wondering what kind of thought you have for that.
Could you say the word about the soul again? I
They
missed.
stole the soul of
Oh,
India.
they stole the soul of India.
The colonizers, and we know, all over the world, and we are not done yet. I
Yeah.
was wondering if you have
Well,
thoughts.
yeah. Well, these disturbances of karma, oh, they're constant. This is why it's important that we don't look for truth in the world that is ever changing, because everything is in transformation, and we don't understand the intricacies of what is taking place karmically. That between, there were good things that happened within the interaction of India and Britain. There were bad things that happened, most of them based on arrogance, of course, but there was a great movement from the east to the west because of that disturbance, and many things that we wouldn't be aware of without that disturbance. We can even see that in Tibet. We wouldn't even know who the Dalai Lama was, but he belongs to the world now, so there is a mystery behind those karmic events. But as HPB indicates, all of this is for the emancipation of the soul. And if we think we have achieved that emancipation, karma is going to show us that we still have a lot of work to do. And so it is good to hang on to the real and not the ever changing.
A delightful answer.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. And shall we go to David Grossman?
Okay. Oh, thanks, Laura, for a a beautiful kind of vision of where we're all trying to head, I think,
Yes.
through vigilance. But I was thinking it's interesting that just the root of vigilance, the word vigil, it means keeping awake when we're usually asleep. That's kind of how vigils work. And and it reminds me of what the Buddha was supposed to have said to his disciple when he was asked, how are you different than other men? And he said, I'm awake.
Yes.
So
Thank you, David. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks.
And as in preparing for this talk, I've been looking at my sloth for about a month now. Trying to be vigilant at every moment and becoming very much aware of how subtle our slothfulness can be and how it can hide, as the one quote that I gave, how it can hide in such deep corners of our nature that we don't even see them until there's a moment or a karmic effort. Then we can say, there's that slothfulness. I knew it was still in there. And so it is a constant process of being awake, for sure.
Very good. Shall we go on to Dawn? And then we have a question from here in the lodge.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I wanted to answer the question about why it's necessary to have the polar energies, both sides. And I think it's important because I recently experienced the effect, the distancing from one side to the other of my oneness, where in order to recognize, as you would say, where you need or require vigilance, you have to experience where you are not in that space. You have to experience what you are not. And in order for you to discover, and what it is the observation of that, the I call it the iron sharpening iron effect. That you need that resistance, that difference, so that you can progress. Progress requires friction, the opposite. And so I've come to, every time I awaken from my slothful state, and realize, this is the condition I'm in, I make another progress. It's not as difficult as you were saying to roll that boulder up the hill. And eventually we realize there is no hill. It's just a perception of something that doesn't exist, until we get to the place where we no longer need to do, we can just be.
You, Dawn. Thank you. And as Jonathan's talk last week on noetic psychology, I believe was the name of the talk, he said that diamonds form under pressure. And HPB, in her secret doctrine at the very beginning, says that nature unaided fails. And so it takes the effort of a vigilant monastic being to raise up that matter. And the only way we can do that is to incarnate into it. And so there we have the two are there with us at this, as HPB said, at this stage of our evolution.
Yes, Laura, that does sound important, that we have to be incarnated in a particular form in order to progress through karma. Now, we did have a question here in the audience from Jonathan. Yeah. Let me let him take the lectern here.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Laura. What a beautiful talk, and so thoughtful and so helpful, really, to all of us that are trying to grapple with, being awake and so forth. I noticed that in one of your slides, especially towards the beginning, about vigilance and sloth, were the two beings, and on the side there was an hourglass, and I was wondering if you had thought about that.
Yes.
I think I'll just leave the question at that. What's the
The one
significance of
thought
the
that
hourglass?
come to mind with that little hourglass is kind of that we're running out of time, that we're time wasters, that we have ignored so long these two forces, and I often think that hourglass is just to help us to remember, to help us to say, hey, wake up, you've got work to do, not only individually but as a whole humanity, because evolution has no beginning and it has no end. And I like to think that at some point in time, as a whole humanity, that maybe we'll take on the responsibility of being a sun for another Earth, that we have great work to do ahead of us. And once we have achieved full awareness, once we have achieved the creating of an instrument that is in service to all that lives, that it will open up a vast new world of work for us to do together, to raise up matter still more in the whole cosmos. So, I like to think that that hourglass shows us that we're never finished, but to keep on working.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for that. And I see a hand raised from Sean. Sean 8, if you're there, if you want to unmute and you can.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes, beautifully.
You, Sean.
First, I want to apologize. True sent me a thing at the beginning. I usually listen to these presentations just through the ears and not through the eyes. So my apologies for the unmuted mic. My question was, Laura, with vigilance, it seems to have a sort of connotation of being very serious. And I was actually wondering, how do you balance uh, um, those karmic events that we are told not to kick at to have a sense of humor with in our form and the human condition, uh, whereas we like indulge in jokes and unnecessary speech. So we kind of lose a lot of our energy to actually repair that sloth and bring it back up to vigilance. But I've always struggled with where is there a balance between a sense of humor and growth and helping and serving um, humanity, and then um, without necessarily being seen as uh, insincere or uncompassionate. Um, our senses of humor probably differ according to our evolution. So I was just wondering, with if you had any perspectives on dealing with our vigilance and um, when we encounter serious students, to be respectful, but at the same time um, understand that a sense of humor is, I think, a very important part of um, well, coping with our karmic incarnations.
Thank you. Well, when we look at the sensing, what is not humorous about looking at our personalities and our lower nature? Oh my goodness. Actually, having a sense of humor comes from knowing that we are not the transitory nature that we occupy. A lot of people who take their personality very seriously, who wear that cloak of personality very heavy on them, they feel it very heavy. They don't have that sense of humor, And we have a student who says that, HPB said that sense of humor was a number one requirement for being a student of theosophy. We need to have a sense of humor. Does anyone else have an idea on the idea of having a sense of humor and its importance in this being vigilant?
Yes, I think
Yeah, go ahead.
Jonathan has a comment here.
Yeah.
Well, just quickly, you mentioned Viveka, and Shankaracharya always kind of had Vairagya and Viveka together, discrimination, detachment, Viveka and Vairagya. And the Vairagya, if you have that, you can have a certain distance. And it seems like, at least when I don't have much of a sense of humor about things, I'm too close and I'm hugging everything too close. So to have a certain distance that I can actually see things with some kind of clarity, then like you say, what is not to think is funny about our personalities at that point? We're all pretty hilarious when you really look at things from the right perspective.
Yes. So. Yes, we are. Yeah. There was a question in the chat. We'll get to that in a moment. David Grossman has his hand up. David?
Well, I was thinking that was a great comment by Sean about having a sense of humor. We think of the lightness of being. So I was just going to throw in also, how about the quality of joy?
Yes. And cheerfulness as the voice of the silence, I think, in 3 places mentions cheerfulness. That we have to be of good cheer. There's no hurry. We're eternal pilgrims. the thing is to just keep on working. And as Mr. Crosby says, our defects don't matter at Hoot. It matters not. It only matters that we were vigilant, that we work, that we try, because all real change begins on the inner planes of our being. And so from that position, incarnating into these elementals, which helps to answer the question in the chat box, is how we raise up those elementals, how we move them. And we have to take responsibility for the current of our thought. I think that is what the story of vigilance is telling us as well. And the great teachers don't let a single thought pass through their mind without taking note of it. So when a thought comes into our head, stop a moment, take a look, ask it, where are you from? How did you get here? Why are you here? What is your purpose? And then examine it and say, well, I'm sorry, that thought doesn't have anything to do with where I'm trying to go. We'll say that to children sometimes. Is the thought that you are thinking right now taking you in the direction you want to go? So that's what we have to do. Oh, I put my hand up.
And thank you, Laura, for re-emphasizing that comment about vigilance related to the thought, or you might say the media that we consume, that we allow into our mind, and that we have to be vigilant of those things as well, both the media and commentaries from other people, but then also the thoughts that arise in our own mind. I had not really before today considered that an aspect of vigilance and sloth in that dynamic. And somehow thoughts will just come into my mind, and assumptions and assessments and judgments. It's very important. Thanks for mentioning that again and emphasizing that. Did you want to say more about the elementals? Well, you touched on that.
The elementals. Well,
From
every thought we think, we know, Theosophy says every thought we think coalesces with an elemental, and that it takes shape. Mr. Judge, in his Ocean of Theosophy, mentions that the brain is an instrument of force, a generator of force. And it can even cause, in the further study of vigilance and in the Devil's Own article, all the diseases, all the plagues, all the difficulties that we have on this planet, the weather, the hurricanes, tornadoes, all come out of the force of our thought and our thinking. And even in Hindu mythology, it says that the kingdoms of our nature are made up of our cast off clothing. And so, what are we casting off all the time? We're casting off our thoughts. And so, we have to be vigilant of what it is that we're thinking.
Yes, thank you. And I'm going to go on to Vimal. Is that how you pronounce your name, Vimal?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. I love being part of your discussions and your talks. It's 5 a.m. for me in India, but I just can't resist getting up at that hour and watching and hearing, and love the talk. The thing is, I just wanted to just add a little thing that this Mahatma Gandhi you mentioned, and you mentioned HPB's saying that India's soul has been robbed by the Britishers. At that one time, much before Gandhi became who he was, most of the Indians who were upper class were aspiring to be like the Brits. So they educated themselves, they dressed like that. So even Gandhi used to dress, and he went to England to study his law and all that. And then when he went to South Africa, when he had a ticket for a first class bogie cabin, but he was not allowed to be there, and he was thrown out of the train. That's when the awakening happened. That's what shook him. So it was, and then he came back to India. He never wore Western clothes again. So something has to happen to make you, even somebody like Gandhi, for him to. And what you're saying, what HPB said about aspiration. See, even now, of course, but then much more, Indians generally aspired for spirituality. But then when the Brits came in, they aspired to be like the Brits. So that's the shift of aspiration that happened. The Brits also, when we see in Senates and Hume's letters and all, they were brilliant. Their clarity, and I don't think straight away one could say an ordinary Indian could do what Sinnett and Hume did in understanding the esoteric philosophy. So there was some great brilliance in the Brits. So that was so aspiration was of another shifted. So just wanted to add this little.
Thank you very much. Well, we know that HPB had a feeling of gratitude towards India for keeping the language of the wisdom religion alive. And she wanted to bring that wisdom to the West. And part of her work was to defend the wisdom of India and to give it a voice in the world because it was important. And so that was her work. And we're so grateful for it. We're grateful to India for keeping alive the wisdom of the ages in a language. They preserved the language of the wisdom. And so for that, the West has a great and it inspired so many. The East, the writings of India inspired the Transcendentalist movement, and the writings of Yeats and Whitman and Emerson were all inspired by the work of India at that time.
Yes, very much inspired by that. Well, thank you for that interplay. And we have a question or comment from Wes Ammerman.
Oh, well, thank you. Really, a good presentation here, Laura. I wanted to make a couple of comments. Vimal made a really good point about India. I think anytime you have a clash of cultures, you have positive and negative. So I think it's always a mixed bag. But, remember, Blavatsky wrote a wonderful article called Civilization, Death of Art and Beauty. And she really took the West to task for doing so much damage to cultures around the world. So anytime you have culture clashes, you're going to have sacrifices, you're going to have injustice. There will be winners and losers, if you will. Sort of that karmic wheel turns. But it's a fascinating kind of influence. I wanted to make one quick comment on the question in the chat about elementals, and just a point that I didn't hear, maybe it was, but that we live in our entire universe, our entire world is composed of just incredible complexity of intelligent lives. It's a living universe of conscious beings, everything from minerals or even more simple, we would say, than those to the highest spiritual beings. It's a vast interconnected web of life. And so the elementals are, in a sense, all of those kingdoms, all of those lives that we influence, some that we're aware of, some we're not, most we're not. So the elementals come in because they are that web of life that we're immersed in, and everything from our own principles to high spiritual beings, in a sense, are elemental in a certain way. So it's just keeping that in mind, I think, is really important. It's a living world, and these are every drop of water in it has its place and its purpose. So it's a fundamental assumption, basis for brotherhood. Yeah.
Yeah. Would you say, Wes, that the elementals could form the basis of our non-separateness? That they embody our non-separateness, that through the elementals, there's no possibility of us existing separately from each other.
Sure, because to say, well, without elementals, well, there would not be a world without the elementals. we would not exist. Our the principles of our nature, in a sense, are elementary in the broadest way. So everything is composed of lives that have been trained well or trained less well, poorly, one could say. So yeah, they constitute the hierarchies of nature in a very real sense.
Thank you. Yeah, we could
Let me
definitely have another discussion on the idea of vigilance and sloth in regards to elementals. That could take up a whole class right there in trying to understand that as well.
And one thing I'll add to the elemental idea is bacteria. So they're not quite spiritual elementals, but they are very small beings. And in my continuing medical education in psychiatry, turns out anxiety and depression can be related to the bacteria in our GI tract. So there's about 3 to 5 or more trillion of those little guys and gals and their little bacteria in our GI tract. And I'm reading a book called Psychobiotics at the moment. And one of the cute little sections is called, How Does Your Microbiome Order Pizza? So apparently these bacteria create different neurotransmitters and hormones and things like that that affect our brain, our mind, our desires for maybe a chocolate candy bar or pizza. But it's really maybe not our desire, but it's the desire of these 3 trillion things living in our gut. But elementals is a fascinating topic. Shall we go to a comment and a question from Joe Miller?
Thank you, Laura. I missed some of the presentation, so I apologize if you covered this. But I had a question in the Buddhist conception of laziness. It does include what we typically think of as reluctance to engage in irksome or difficult tasks. But there's another form of laziness that's related to self-doubt or a feeling of inferiority. And I wonder if we typically wouldn't think of that as laziness, but I wonder if you have anything to say about that.
So I think that was at the end of our talk from the quotes from Mr. Crosby, that doubt is, and fear, it comes from a lack of discernment, a lack of who we are as the sun, the solar force, working through the lunar past. And we begin to doubt ourselves in dealing with this lunar past. And that all comes from that lack of discernment. And as Mr. Crosby says, don't worry about your defects. They don't matter. What matters is the struggle. What matters is the effort that we put forward. That's what we take with us, is the effort we made. We've already made the changes on the inner planes of our being, even if we haven't completely overcome any defect. We can think of someone who is an alcoholic. They fought 100 times. They said, no, I'm not going to take a drink 100 times. And then at the end, they drop that rock, falls back down, and they take that drink. What is more important, Mr. Crosby, I think, is showing is that 100 times is much more important than that one time that they failed. And this is why we should never judge anybody or anyone, because there is a great battle taking place within each one of our humanity and in that effort. And that we should honor that battle. It's a struggle. Diamonds are formed under pressure, and everyone's in the process of making a diamond. So they're under a lot of pressure. So.
Hear, hear. Well, thank you for that. And shall we squeeze in another question or comment from Jairo as we wind up the time today?
Sure.
Jairo, you're on.
Oh, we can't hear you, Jairo.
Your microphone is probably too low because you're unmuted, but
okay.
We are.
What
Good.
what what is the different? No, what are the differences between vid, mindfulness and vigilance? Because mindfulness, I gather it's more coming from Buddhist teachers, and it's become mainstream. And how do you compare that to vigilance?
Very
Thank you.
good question, Yarrow. Of course, on one level, we could look at it as the same. Mindfulness is being vigilant on the plane of the mind. And, but we have other ways. Can we be spiritually vigilant? Can we be emotionally vigilant? Are we aware of the feelings of others? Are we mindful of those feelings? There's vigilance can be applied to every corner of our nature. And as HPB pointed out in her article, Devil's Own, is that until we've examined every aspect of our nature with vigilance, that we cannot assume the position of the spiritual being that we are, that we have this lower nature that we occupy. I think one student put it that once we know that we are not this lower nature, that we are not these instruments, it's our duty to turn them into a great Mahatma. So there's the work that we have to do. No one else is going to give us a perfect instrument. We have to create that ourselves with this idea of vigilance on the mind and the body, the emotions, and the spirit as well. So thank you, everyone, for this opportunity to examine these two ideas.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Laura. Appreciate that so much. A great reminder that theosophy is not just reading books, but it's also putting this all into action. Until next week, we look forward to seeing you at the next upcoming Aquarian series.
True sacrifice.
True sacrifice. Right.
Wonderful.
Bye
Thank
for
you.
now.
Thank
Bye
you.
for now, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
I know.
Thank you.
You're all.